We pay what seems like an eye-watering amount of tax when we fill our cars with fuel, but I don't think it's high enough and it should actually be increased. Let me explain. The price of petrol is currently around £1.55 per litre. RAC Fuel Watch provides a breakdown of that price. 38% is the wholesale cost of the fuel to the retailer. The retailer's margin currently accounts for around 10% of the price and delivery is 1%. This means that the tax collected, fuel duty and VAT, is a very high 51%. How could I possibly argue that it should be increased? Well, I think that there are really good reasons to do this. Let's start by asking the question, what is the role of fuel tax? Fuel tax serves two purposes. Firstly, it's a significant income source for the government, and secondly, it's an environmental measure reducing air pollution and congestion. As a source of revenue for the financial year 2023-24, the government will raise £24.3 billion from fuel tax. This is 2.3% of all government receipts. By the way, this is just the fuel duty element of the tax collected on fuel. Based on current figures, the VAT collected on fuel would add roughly another £12 billion. What's interesting is that fuel tax has been falling in real terms. This is fuel tax expressed as a percentage of UK GDP. In 2000, fuel tax was more than 2% of UK GDP. Now it's around 1%. This is a loss of revenue of around £24 billion. Unlike income tax or VAT, UK fuel tax is collected as a fixed amount. It's been frozen at 57.95 pence since 2011-2012. The past 2 years it has been temporarily reduced to 52.95 pence due to the energy market crisis. Freezing it like this has had the effect of reducing it in real terms. Normally, with a fixed tax like this, you would expect a government to increase it each year in line with inflation, which would maintain a more constant ratio to GDP. Instead, it's been allowed to dramatically decrease. Now, I've never really heard any debate about the role of fuel tax. If the arguments in favour of fuel tax are strong, why have we been allowing it to fall? If the arguments are weak, why aren't we reducing it further or removing it altogether? No discussion about it makes no sense. The first motor fuel duty was collected in 1909. At this time, of course, environmental issues were not a consideration, so it was set up as a revenue-raising measure. I guess that there were additional costs arising for government from the increasing number of cars at that time in terms of road building and maintenance, so it made sense to make motorists pay towards this. The importance of fuel duty as an environmental measure has dramatically increased, particularly in more recent years. In 2019, the UK became the first major economy to pass a law mandating net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. The UK Parliament has also adopted a declaration that we're in a climate and ecological emergency. It's clear that the fuel tax is a useful tool that can contribute towards this policy objective and meet these legal requirements. In this context, why on earth would the government allow it to fall so significantly? There's a piece of research that comes up with a credible answer for this. It found that there's a correlation between a government's electoral lead and increases in fuel tax rates. Where there's strong political competition, we don't see increases in fuel tax rates. It certainly would not be popular to raise fuel duty. However, this is what political leadership is about. We need our leaders to take far more action if we're serious about decarbonisation. Estimates suggest that total UK carbon emissions are up to 5% higher than they would have been if the fuel duty had not remained fixed and been allowed to increase as planned in the 2010 budget. I think the government needs to open up a debate on what should happen to fuel duty. It should definitely be increased back to where it was in real terms. In my opinion, there's also a strong argument that it should be increased above this. To meet our climate goals, we definitely need to encourage less use of cars. However, at the same time, we can recognise that there are differing needs for cars between urban and rural populations. I do think that this has to be considered. Perhaps there's a way of distinguishing between urban congested environments that have public transport infrastructure and rural areas. With the latter, there is anyway less congestion and air pollution and less public transport, so there's more of a case for people to use cars to get to work, for example. Could fuel tax be higher in urban areas, with the additional revenue going into improvements in public transport? I think we need to dramatically improve public transport if we're really going to get people to move away from vehicles powered by fossil fuels. These are the type of issues that should be taken into account if we did increase fuel duty. One final point to make in terms of fuel duty as a source of revenue for government is that once petrol and diesel engines are phased out, no fuel tax will be collected, as electric cars don't pay any fuel tax. There may have to be an electricity tax on electric cars, not least to help with congestion. In conclusion, reducing or removing fuel tax would be popular, but it would be disastrous. It would definitely result in increased air pollution and more congestion. For me, it's a good tax with very strong economic benefits. But it shouldn't just be a revenue raiser. It should be more carefully considered as part of a coordinated environmental plan with necessary investments in public transport and sustainable alternatives. 51% tax does sound very high, but I do think it should be progressively increased. I hope you found this information useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.